My name is Harper Ellington, and for the first time in my life, I will say aloud what I spent years hiding behind justifications, flimsy excuses, and silences that suffocated me from the inside. Because before anything else, before any spiritual experience, even before the death that transformed everything I believed in, I was an accomplice. I participated in a kidnapping, not as someone who was dragged along, not as a victim of circumstances, not as someone who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I participated because I chose to participate. That is the truth that burns the most, the truth that haunted me for entire nights, even when I pretended not to hear my own conscience knocking at the door. I helped behind the scenes, as if that would make what was happening any less cruel. I made calls, monitored movements, kept in touch with whoever was in charge. I told myself that it wasn't that serious, that I wasn't the one who tied it up, that I wasn't the one who hurt it. But today I know that when a soul is robbed of its freedom, everyone who contributes in any way carries a piece of that darkness. And I carried mine for too long, until it became a weight that even my own body couldn't bear. What hurts the most is not just admitting what I did, but remembering how skilled I became at hiding it, even from myself. I wore a mask of strength when, in reality, I lived like someone broken inside, trying to convince myself that it was still possible to control a life that had already completely spiraled out of control. I said I was in charge, when in fact I was dominated by the fear of facing who I had become. And yet, nothing prepared me for the moment when the whole truth would come to light in a way I never imagined. Because when I died and saw everything from the outside, I realized that no mask can survive eternity. I know this story has already made you reflect right from the start. Before moving on, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps this message reach other people who also need to face what they have been avoiding for too long. Stay with me, because what comes after this confession reveals something that no human being expects to see. When I think about the life I led before everything fell apart, I realize that every step I took towards crime was paved with illusions I nurtured myself, as if I were building a castle of smoke that gave me a false sense of power and control. I, Harper Ellington, plunged into that world believing I had finally found something to fill the void that had accompanied me since very early on. And for a while, I truly thought I was living a kind of dangerous but seductive freedom that made me feel alive in a way nothing else could. Money came easily, and the adrenaline of participating in something clandestine created an addictive sensation that completely numbed me, as if every wrong decision placed me on an invisible pedestal where I believed I was untouchable. The people around me seemed to admire my calculated coldness, but no one imagined that this posture was merely a fragile shield I erected to hide the weight of choices that began small, but gradually became tight chains around my own soul. I lived among people who treated fear as a bargaining chip, and little by little I absorbed this mentality, believing that intimidating, manipulating, or controlling other lives was just part of the game. And in this game, I began to confuse respect with fear, loyalty with dependence, courage with insensitivity, until I completely lost sight of what it meant to be an honest person, or even human. It wasn't just the money. It was the feeling of belonging to something bigger than myself, even if that something was a web of rotten choices that fed my pride while silently draining whatever goodness once remained within me. Every phone call, every meeting, every order I obeyed reinforced this distorted sense of power, as if I were finally in control of a life that had always seemed to slip through my fingers. But the truth, which I would only see much later, is that this false power was never mine. Crime molded me like clay, seduced me with empty promises, and without my realizing it, slowly led me to an abyss from which there would be no return. And it is precisely at the moment when this illusion begins to crumble that the story I am about to tell you becomes even darker. The truth is that no one enters the darkness all at once. They approach it slowly, almost imperceptibly, until the silence of their own conscience becomes so familiar that it no longer causes any discomfort. That's exactly how it was with me. I, Harper Ellington, still vividly remember the moment I first agreed to participate in the kidnapping. It wasn't a grand event. There was no direct threat, no unbearable pressure. There was only a proposal that found a tired, confused heart, willing to believe that it would be just a little help, just a small part, just a task that wouldn't make a difference. That's always how evil begins, with a small just. When I hung up the phone that day, I felt a cold shock run through my body, as if something had shifted inside me without my control. It wasn't fear of the crime, nor apprehension of the human consequences, but a profound spiritual warning that sought to alert me that I was about to cross a line from which I might never return. And yet, I ignored it. I ignored it because the promise of money was convenient. But I ignored it mainly because my soul was already too asleep to react. At that exact moment, I perceived a strange sensation, as if a shadow had approached and taken over a space that previously belonged to my sensitivity. There was no noise, no supernatural vision, but there was the silent realization that something had opened within me, an inner door that was previously protected by values, memories, fragilities, and moral boundaries that I no longer respected. From then on, each wrong choice became easier. Each step towards crime seemed natural, until what was once a conflict now transformed into a habit. And that's precisely the danger that few people understand. No one becomes complicit in a terrible evil overnight. The fall begins small, discreet, almost invisible. But when we finally realize where we are, we're already too far gone. And perhaps that's why I'm asking you now. What was the first door you opened and pretended not to see? As the days, weeks, and months passed, I realized that the darkness that had entered me the moment I accepted that first task no longer asked for permission. It moved freely, shaping my thoughts, numbing my sensitivity, and distancing me from any vestige of humanity that still tried to survive within me. I, Harper Ellington, began to normalize evil like someone who gets used to a dimly lit room. At first you find it strange, then you see better, and finally you come to believe that that dimness is enough. And so, without realizing it, I began to confuse absence of guilt with strength, neutrality with maturity, coldness with control. Every call I made, every message I relayed, every move I helped coordinate ceased to be a burden and became part of my routine. The victim's pain became so distant that it seemed to belong to another reality, and the family's suffering, which once deeply troubled me, became just an inconvenient detail that I pushed away from my mind. Crime became language, habit, breath, and the deeper I delved into it, the more I believed that indifference was a kind of armor protecting me from any fragility. But indifference doesn't protect, it corrodes. It slowly destroys everything that makes a soul alive, until you become someone who no longer feels true joy, deep remorse, or genuine compassion. It's as if the heart becomes a silent desert where nothing flourishes. And I started noticing this not because I cared, but because less and less anything affected me. And when nothing affects you, it's because you're already dying inside. The problem is that I believed I was becoming stronger, when in reality I was becoming a prisoner of a void I myself had created. And it was precisely in this state of total insensitivity that life decided to surprise me with something I never imagined facing so soon. Because during that period, while I believed I was in absolute control of everything around me, death was already silently walking towards me, ready to show me what it costs to ignore the weight of one's own choices. I used to believe that death gave signs, that before arriving, it would somehow warn, leave clues, awaken premonitions. But when it came for me, it came like a silent thief, one of those who enter through the door you left unlocked without noticing. I, Harper Ellington, never imagined that on that ordinary afternoon, driving down a road I knew like the back of my hand, I would be ripped from life as if the ground had been pulled from under my feet. The sky was gray, but nothing indicated tragedy. The city continued its rhythm, cars passing, people rushing, stories happening parallel to mine. I was just another one, lost in empty thoughts, believing myself immune to any real consequence. I remember the exact moment everything changed, the sharp sound of the brakes, the feeling that the world slowed down around me, the brutal impact that threw my body against the steering wheel. There was no time for fear, no room for belated regret. There was only an internal explosion, a silence that crushed all noise, and a strange realization that something inside me had broken free. I felt my body become heavy, then too light, as if matter had lost its importance. My vision began to fade at the edges, while my mind tried to scream for help, even knowing that there was nothing more that could be done. It was in that interval between my last breath and the first second outside the flesh that I realized that death is not absence. It is transition. A passage so swift that it is almost violent, capable of tearing apart known reality and opening up a completely new one before spiritual eyes. I had no time to make promises, no minutes to plead for mercy, no chance to rebuild what I destroyed. Life ceased without ceremony, and I was cast out of it like someone expelled from a place they occupied without understanding the price. And what happened next was something not even my darkest imagination could have conceived. Because when I finally saw my own fallen body, I realized that death is not the end. It's the beginning of reckoning. When my eyes opened again, it wasn't to life, but to the stark realization that I no longer inhabited my own body. The first thing I saw was the scene of the accident, illuminated by a strange light, as if the entire surrounding environment were enveloped in a thin veil separating the material world from what I now was. I, Harper Ellington, observed my completely immobile body, trapped in the wreckage, while the air seemed to vibrate with a sensation not of this earth. Time didn't flow as usual. Everything seemed suspended still, as if reality itself had held its breath before that transition. At first, I tried to get closer, tried to touch my own face, but my hands passed through matter as if I were made of wind, and this impossibility threw me into such a deep state of confusion that for a few moments I believed I was dreaming. The absence of physical weight frightened me. I moved effortlessly, but carried a growing dread, a terrible premonition that this was not a dream. It was the beginning of a truth I had spent my whole life ignoring. The sound of the sirens in the distance was muffled, as if echoing underwater, and yet I heard everything with a spiritual clarity impossible to describe. I was too aware, too lucid, too sensitive. There was no longer the filter of the body to soften anything. Each sensation came in whole, like a blow, and the supernatural reality began to reveal itself in layers I never imagined existed. It was then that I perceived a presence around me, not human, not visible, but as real as anything I had ever experienced. Something was watching. Something was waiting. Something seemed to measure every detail of my exposed soul. And before I could comprehend it, a subtle force began to pull my being away from the scene, as if leading me to a place where there would be no more room for lies, masks, or defenses. And it is precisely at this moment, when the AIDS spirit is torn from denial, that the most terrifying revelation approaches, that no one crosses this border without facing the one who sees all. As that invisible force pulled me away from the scene of the accident, I realized it wasn't violence, but authority. An authority so absolute that my spirit dared not resist. I, Harper Ellington, was led to a space where there was no time, walls, sky, or ground. There was only a presence that filled everything, a living light that didn't hurt the eyes, but exposed the soul with devastating clarity. And it was in that light that he appeared. Not walking, not emerging from a specific point. He simply was. The impact of seeing him cannot be described with human words. He was not the sentimental figure we often imagine, nor the gentle tone of comfort that so many expect to find. Jesus presented himself before me as judge, and his holiness was so intense that I felt every lie I told, every silence I chose, every action that hurt someone, burning inside me as if being revisited under a lens that never deceives. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to make accusations. He didn't need to enumerate my sins. His gaze was enough, a gaze that saw through me with infinite depth, for my entire past to be revealed without me being able to hide absolutely anything. I tried to look away. I tried to look down. I tried to mentally escape what was being exposed, but there was nowhere to run within that absolute truth. It was as if each of my choices took shape, as if I were watching myself hurt, omit, destroy. And for the first time, I felt the real weight of each life touched by the crime. I felt the victim's pain, the family's despair, the spiritual impact of my decisions that I had so easily ignored in life. And while all this was passing through me, Jesus remained silent, allowing me to see myself as I truly was. And it is precisely in this silence, more cutting than any verbal judgment, that something even deeper began to happen. because after the truth was exposed, he would show me the consequence. And no human preparation prepares us to see what is about to be revealed. It was then that the light surrounding Jesus seemed to move, not to push me away, but to reveal something my soul would never have dared to face of its own accord. The feeling wasn't one of punishment, but of truth being ripped from the darkness, as if he were opening the curtains of the spiritual world so that I could see, unfiltered, what had always existed behind my actions. I, Harper Ellington, felt my spirit tremble as the scene before me began to transform. The light gave way to a profound space, as if I were looking into a silent abyss where the echo of human choices never dies. I saw people. Not symbolic figures, not distant shadows, but real people, with real stories, with tears that still carried weight in eternity. The first image that appeared was that of the kidnapping victim, not at the moment of the crime, but in the, emotional suffering that continued long after everything had happened. It was as if the trauma had left eternal scars, marks that did not fade with time, and that echoed like invisible screams that I, in life, never wanted to hear. I witnessed the despair, the fearful thoughts, the loss of peace, as if those feelings were waves directly striking my spirit. After that, Jesus showed me something even more devastating. The family I saw sleepless nights. I saw desperate prayers. I saw pleas for answers that never came. I saw suffering that spread like an invisible current, impacting lives I never imagined it would reach. And then he said, in a voice that seemed to pierce through everything, "The evil you help create doesn't end when the action ends. It continues to live on in those who were hurt." At that moment, I understood that hell was not just a place of torment, but a state of separation from the light, fueled by choices that distance us from the truth. And, as I absorbed this revelation, another image began to emerge. Not of condemnation, but of a possibility I never thought I would receive. Something was approaching, something unexpected, something that would completely transform the outcome of that encounter. When that last image faded, my soul was completely broken, stripped of any justification, fully aware of the abyss my choices had created. I, Harper Ellington, no longer had words, strength, or arguments to rescue myself from what I had seen. My only possible reaction was a profound silence, almost a spiritual faint, as if I were sinking into my own shame. And it was precisely at that instant, at the most vulnerable point of my existence, that the light surrounding Jesus changed. It was no longer the light that exposed, but the light that calls. A light so unexpected that it made my spirit tremble with disbelief. For the first time, I felt something akin to mercy touching what remained of me. It wasn't condescension. It wasn't cheap absolution. It wasn't an everything's all right. It was the possibility of a new beginning, but accompanied by the weight of everything that still needed to be faced. Jesus didn't need to explain, because simply being in his presence is enough to understand. True repentance isn't crying over what happened. It's rebuilding what can still be healed. Even if it hurts, even if no one believes you, even if shame tries to paralyze you. In the blink of an eye, I was returned to my body, and the physical pain returned, with the same intensity as the spiritual awareness burning within me. I woke up in the hospital with beeping machines, doctors rushing around, confused voices all around me, but nothing was louder than the call that echoed within my soul. The first thing I thought of wasn't myself, nor my own survival, but the victim's family. I knew I needed to find them. Not to fix everything, because certain wounds only God can heal, but to take on the responsibility I had run from for so long. The journey to them was marked by trembling, tears, and fear of rejection, but also by a new, firm conviction, almost impossible to explain. And when I finally found myself about to face what I had denied for years, I realized that most of the transformation was yet to come. Because true forgiveness requires more than courage. It requires surrender. When I finally faced the victim's family, I realized that the true test wasn't just confessing my guilt, but holding the gaze of people deeply wounded by something I helped cause. I, Harper Ellington, felt my legs weaken as the door opened, and I met faces that carried not only memories, but spiritual scars left by suffering I could never measure. There were no hugs, no soothing words, no immediate comfort. There was silence, a heavy, deep, almost palpable silence, a silence that seemed to span entire generations, as if every tear from that family had been recorded before heaven and kept there, between their gaze and mine. It was a silence where each pain seemed to be presented directly to God, and I felt that He was allowing me to see the true impact of the evil I had helped to create. And in that instant, while my heart raced and my hands trembled, I understood that true repentance is not about being accepted or absolved, but about placing oneself in the deepest position of humility, recognizing that some wounds need to be faced even when we know there will be no easy, quick, or comforting answers. I told everything, every detail, every omission, every involvement, every choice made while I hid behind the coldness that crime taught me to wear as armor. I revealed what I had tried to silence within myself for years, as if the truth, once spoken aloud, could finally break the spiritual chain that bound me to the past. I didn't ask for forgiveness expecting to receive it, because I knew that forgiveness is not a bargaining chip, but a gift that can only be offered by someone who faces pain that I often wouldn't even be able to comprehend. I asked for forgiveness because I recognized that it is the only force capable of restoring what evil tries to destroy definitively. And, although the eyes of that family carried sadness, resentment, disbelief, and a whole slope of feelings that I could never fully decipher, I perceived something that marked me deeply. Even without words, they listened to me. And listening, for those who suffered so much, was already an act of generosity far greater than I deserved. I left there with a lighter spirit, not because I was absolved, but because I finally did what I should have done from the beginning. Face the truth. Face not only the pain I caused, but the person I had become. And this awareness followed me like a burning flame within me, reminding me daily that redemption is not a destination, but a path that demands vigilance, surrender, and the courage to start over every day. The moment I took that step towards my family, I realized that God was showing me that, to rebuild the soul, it is necessary to cross territories of shame, fragility, and exposure that we often try to avoid. However, it is precisely in these territories that the light can enter and transform what we insist on keeping in the shadows. And now I speak to you, who are watching my story, perhaps with a lump in your throat, perhaps with a restless heart, perhaps recognizing in yourself small signs of choices that have the power to distance you from the light. Don't wait for death to see what you're eyeing. Decisions are building. Don't wait for life to knock you off your feet to realize what you already know deep down. Don't wait for an accident, a loss, an illness, a brutal interruption of your routine to understand that every action is recorded, that every behavior shapes destinies, and that every silence can open doors that only God knows. Examine yourself today now, while there is still time to go back, to ask for forgiveness, to restore what has been wounded, to heal what is bleeding, to start over before the weight of the consequences becomes greater than you can bear. If this message touched your soul in any way, write in the comments, "I choose the light." And subscribe to the channel now, because there are still spiritual truths you need to hear before life makes you learn them the hard way.